Hello, my name is Michael Sandoval,
And I'm Chris Detzel.
and welcome to another episode of Beers Over Beers.
Cheers.
How are you? Cheers, man. It's nice to see you. Cheers.
Yeah, good to see you.
So this, I guess, will have to be our Christmas special because,
Well, sort of, because people won't really listen to this until January or February when we post it.
I think they should because it's like a Christmas gift that keeps on giving.
And just keep on listening to it.
So the beer for today is Dallas Blonde, and didn't come in a growler this time, but this is one of my favorites. It's actually pretty good. It's tasty.
Yeah, I love Dallas Blonde.
Blondes or just blonde?
Both.
Totally. Sorry, went off the cliff there. Sorry about that. That's for later. All right. So as we always do, we're kind of prepping, chit-chatting and talking. And you had brought up a question, I think in one of our previous episodes. I think we were talking about super users generally. Yeah. And then we were talking about customer advocacy. But you've been swirling around, and I always find your swirling around questions you send me incredibly interesting. And the swirling around questions were around super users. Super users. What's a super user? What do you do with them? How do you get them? How does it create a program? And in your the way you kind of do it, you go out and ask the community, and you do something very interesting. You got them all together, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So the other day I was on Twitter, and I kept starting to think about my own community, and I thought, how do I get people feeling good and start kind of, in a sense, creating this kind of, I wouldn't call it super user program, but just some tactics that I can do to get to a super user program. And one of the things I thought was, you know what, why don't I just do kind of a spotlight on customers that are posting or replying to stuff? And I did that, right? So I recorded a customer conversation with me the other day, and I'm going to blog about that conversation. But
with an actual customer?
With an actual customer, yeah. And I thought, that'd be really cool, and have her on in January, and maybe do this once a month, and unless I can find more customers, and just spotlight them. I don't have to say, hey, these are the most amazing customers. I can just say, this customer is an expert in these things. They work at this company. They like this. Is this one woman loves coffee and things like that. So it was very interesting. But I thought, okay, that's one tactic that I can do to kind of drive some interest and get to know people in general, blog about them and things like that. And I thought that's kind of fun. And I thought, how do you really even think about a super user program? Like, I don't even, I'll be honest, and it's hard to admit sometimes, but I don't know everything. And so, putting a super user program together, it seemed very daunting, because there's a lot of words out there, or phrases like advocacy program, super user program, MVP program, ambassador program. I don't know. And I'm like, God, do I need all these things? Are they all different? I don't really know.
Sorry.
Some of these marketing folks do, some of these customer success, some communities do, and so I just decided to ask the question on Twitter the other day. This was like 3 or 4 days ago or so. Maybe it was a week ago. I don't remember. But
you got a response?
Yeah, and I got several responses to say, we do these things, we do that. And then a guy that I'm getting to know really well lately is a guy named Blake Etheridge. He goes, hey, Chris, let's just get on the phone and then we'll talk about it. And I said, great. And so I put something together, invite, and I thought, I talked to a lot of community managers. I wonder who else might be interested. And I sent an invite to 10 other community managers.
Right.
And he sent out an invite to several other people. And he's been doing this thing called CMX Connect. Yeah. And it's really connecting with a lot of people from that group. And so he sent an email to them. And then he sent me an email this morning, I think, or yesterday. He goes, hey, Chris, what are we going to talk about? Or, he goes, should I prepare something? I go, yeah, man, just put 2 slides together and I'll just ask you a bunch of questions. He said, okay. And then he got on the phone and had this whole deck presentation today around super user program.
Yeah,
it was
he's a good guy.
Excellent. And there was 15 plus people, literally director level and things like that around, community managers. And I posted on LinkedIn, but dude, it was awesome. This guy, he knows his shit, but he gave me so much detail. Like I told you earlier, he was like, he gave me so much detail. I was like, great, I have my super user program. I know what it is now.
Yeah.
You know?
So you said there was a PowerPoint. I mean, we can link it in the show notes, right? So if folks want to see it, they can.
Yeah, I have actually the Google Drive link that can give you the PowerPoint and the audio.
Right. Well, I think when we were talking, you had some pretty interesting insights, right? In fact, as we were talking, I went in my strategy zone going, oh, okay, this is good, but this is in the maturization point of the community, right? And then we had this like, well, what does that mean? How does that? So we can talk about that in a moment, but
yeah.
So I think one of the points that that Blake brought up was, and I think if I understand the conversation, he kind of put top things you need to do for
that's right,
for like to create a super user program, and I think to help define super user program, I'm going to put some words, and you can let me know if this is the right words.
Okay.
But it's fundamentally finding the right mix of your most engaged, technically savvy, in this case, depends on the community.
Sure.
Users.
Kind of a support community, I would say that's probably true.
Oh, okay, yeah, and it's support community, that's right. It's different in any type of community, which is the most engaged user. And then recognize them as so, and the rest of the community knows that they're the super user, and they've kind of become your maybe second level or third level support team on the site in some way. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think that he touched on that pretty well. Yeah.
And I know, like, for example, I think we talked about it briefly. Like in Microsoft, they have an MVP program, the most valuable, I don't know, this person or participant. I forget what the P stood for, and that's quite the thing.
Sophisticated,
incredibly sophisticated. But so one of the points you brought up was this idea of, at least the first point I think Blake brought up was communication, or the ability to communicate the program or communicate to those users. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I think the second point, or at least in that point, you were talking about what I call follow the sun, or making sure that the mix of individuals were across the globe.
That's right.
What was his point around that follow the globe piece?
Yeah, I think it was, and maybe he'll correct me, but find people across the globe that really can help answer the questions so that you kind of have this 24/7 support system, for the community. I think that, you try not to have just answers hanging out there for long. And so he talked about, like, if you get somebody from, I don't know, whatever country, France, and then Australia and US and all these places, you have your whole entire support system kind of, especially from a super user, because they're going to answer questions. They'll be excited to answer those questions. They want to do it, and
they really do. It's wonderful about the super user program.
Yeah.
Because the next one was around, well, why do you want it? Why do you build it? Right? And I think there was this idea that you somehow had to spend some time understanding within the community team, why do you want a super user program? Correct?
Yeah, I think you have to really define, what is the goal of the super user program? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And things like that. And so you have to define why. What is the why? This friend of mine, another community manager, Nick, from financialforce.com, always says, "What's your why, Chris? What's your why?" I was like, dude, just tell me your answer. Who cares? Just tell me what the answer is. But he makes a good point, and I think that that is always hard. But once you figure that out, and I think Blake said that today, is when you figure out your why, everything else kind of comes into place.
No, I agree. That's the first thing you have to kind of go figure out.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you on if you had any ahas, because I'm curious if you've already kind of thought through this in your community. Like, okay, why do I want a super user program? But we'll come back to it. Don't go away. The other point,
I'm not going anywhere, by the way.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's right. I have you tied down here, and the beer's good. What drives their? I'm going to put point 3 and point 4 together, and you said one of them was around motivation, and then there was another one around what is their reason to be there. And I almost saw those as kind of being two same points. But it sounded to me as around motivation, right? Why is a super user a super user? What's their motivation? What's the thing they want to do? And what drives their reason to be there, right? Was that the point that was brought up?
Yeah, I think so. What he did is, those points that I gave you were specific to each of his slides. So
right. No, I agree. Yeah, you almost have to read the PowerPoint, and you should. And we'll have it in the show notes so folks to read.
So some of the things that he mentioned, what motivates users, right? And some of it was, physical rewards. Is it self-identifying swag, gift cards, trips to conferences and things like that? And then there's virtual awards, and then we talked about competition. Are they competitive? Do they want to win something, or who knows? So, and he talked about that, and so that's kind of the I guess the high level stuff, right?
Yeah, I find the motivation piece interesting, right? So I think when we work together, I talk about this idea of intrinsic and extrinsic rewards.
That's right.
And it really depends on the community, because like in like high tech support communities, sometimes just having the badge that I am a super user, alpha geek, whatever that may be, sometimes that's enough, right? But folks love like the simple swag and tchotchkes stuff. And we had some, and I think you probably have some experience now about like, well, is this the thing that you want? What's really going to get you all excited about coming out of the community, right? Is it money?
Well, it's always money.
Of course, it's always money. That's always a little hard thing to send off to folks. So I'm sorry I didn't do that. Well, the other point you had was around how do you find them?
Yep.
Or at least what Blake was talking about. I think this is an interesting one. How do you find them?
Yeah, the things that he talked about, I mean, probably things that I would not really think about, but I would just kind of do all these tactical things to try to go find them, email them and do a bunch of stuff. But, his thought was, and step one was like creating a beta feedback program for the community. And in that way, you can get feedback from those users. You can start kind of identifying maybe some of those users as well. And then, even internally, like building an internal referral network. So connecting to those people that are customer facing, like sales and SEs and TAMs and customer success managers, and those that are close to that is try to kind of figure out who those people are and then communicate that out to them directly and say, hey, look, I'm starting this super user program or something like that, and I'm trying to find customers. And then he mentioned there's some social ways to kind of do that. So using social channels to push across things organically and paid. So, and using those channels in a big way to, find those kind of people.
In this section, did he talk a little bit, and let me know if he did, around how he metriced those individuals?
We didn't talk about metrics, and that was, I'm very interested in maybe getting your thoughts around that, because he didn't touch upon that. Now, I bet he has a lot of things to say about it, but we didn't talk about it. But I am highly interested if you have some thoughts around, what are some core KPIs around some of that stuff?
Yeah, so the thing that kind of goes back into my head was around this concept of why are you building it? Right. And part of the why part is, one is self-preservation, which is I want the community to survive on itself. But then to get the will of the company to do it, it has to have some level of corporate buy-in. Right. So
that's right.
What is the, well, to be just to the point, I mean, what's the economic reason for having a super user program? Right.
Yeah.
And one of the metrics should be almost like number of questions answered by the super user.
Yeah.
And then there could be an easy dollar figure around that, right? I think the MVP program did something almost, I'm going to grossly overstate or understate the number, but they were talking about the MVP program provides millions of dollars of free support to Microsoft's products, right?
Well, I think you and I talked about this, is when you look at case deflection and things like that, if an organization could say, from beginning of a a case to the end of a case. This is how much it's worth, and it could be from $150, and I've seen to like $600, some crazy amount. But I think the organization has to state that number. The support team themselves have to state that, and then you can kind of start looking at questions answered, how many people are coming to it from Google, and things like that, and you can start looking at the case deflection number and putting a dollar amount on there.
Yes.
So.
No, and I even think I think
I don't know if I was getting into the right.
No, you're exactly correct.
What you were thinking, but
no, this is exactly what I'm thinking. Again, because I'm trying to make sure that we apply some of the reason for these programs to be very much business results oriented.
Yeah.
But I think in the super user program, it does serve two purposes. It can literally be a way for self-preservation and driving strong economic value back into the company. I mean, clearly.
To me, it's clear, man. Like if customers are really focused on answering other customer questions and put some good detail into that answer. I mean, depending on the community, but for me, if I think of the SEO value, bringing existing customers to the site just from Google and getting their question answered quickly, and then even when a non-customer, a potential paying customer comes to the site by typing in a search on Google, and they come to the site, and maybe they create a login and then ask their own questions or whatever about the product or something like that. I mean, there's huge opportunities in both ways, but they're different, right? One's kind of a new acquisition, and the other one is just but it answers a question quickly. It's a case deflection, I assume, or just something like that.
Yeah, no. As you're talking, it's fun because when we talk like this, how I get a little bit philosophical. I start going to the whiteboard, and whenever you see my eyes kind of start shifting up to the left and right, I'm going processing.
Yeah.
Like in my head, immediately what I'm thinking about is like, if I had a whiteboard, I'd be all over it. So total, I would almost come up with an acronym like total economic impact of post, TEIP, something like that. My TEIP is this broad number.
Yeah.
And that broad number is, if I put a bar graph that's stacked, one piece is going to be around almost the existential or I can tie physical numbers to this post by the number of answers it has provided and the number of cases deflected. And that has a dollar figure, right? Very simple.
Yep.
Another one would be if you're on the product side or manufacturing side, total amount of conversion dollar figure, right? Because obviously those posts will create some conversion.
Yep.
Yeah, you can put that in there. And
we're talking about like a what were we at the Rexel when we were there?
You can almost put some easy dollar figure.
So like an e-commerce site, that's tied to your community. And so basically what we did was we would write about specific products, content around that, and then send or try to send over customers to the e-commerce sites to either create a new login or buy more and things like that.
You got it. So very good for making that statement, because there could be a site in which you're not an e-commerce site. You can be like a manufacturer, and the manufacturer may tie things like we call like a sales inquiry.
Yeah,
and as a sales inquiry that has a certain sales in value.
So let's put it in perspective. Like, I like to hear real life. So you can say manufacturer is fine, but let's put it in perspective. Like a Sylvania, they're a light bulb maker, and they do other things, right? So let's put it in that perspective. Let's give it a real life example.
Easily. So if you were Sylvania,
they're no longer Sylvania, I don't think.
Yeah, it's a lead vance, right?
Yeah, okay.
Actually, I think in the States they're still called Sylvania, but that's a whole other conversation.
It doesn't matter.
But
not for this podcast anyway.
Right. So, that manufacturer's in because they sell everything through other distributors, right?
Yeah.
So for them, the money, and this is where each company is different. The money for them is going to be an individual user that they moved to a transactional site. Okay. So they come in, they go to a light bulb page, and then they say where to buy, and then that's golden. They consider that a sale, right? And there's an economic value point that they've already figured out in the model that you can just tie yourself to.
Okay,
right? It's a very simple thing. I mean, in my head, I can see that. But every company, every digitalized company, every company who goes through a digital transformation has at some point defined the conversions that's going to bring money. They have to, right? So in some way, you almost tie yourself to that. The next third piece of the total economic impact of a post would be SEO. I 100% agree. You can almost put a dollar figure by how much you spend on ad, and look at that as a CPM model, right? So if you're spending, $1 million every year on SEM,
Yep.
just find a model that looks a lot like yours.
It's just basically paid search.
Paid search, and just put a
It's
paid
SEM,
search
yep.
model on that one post, and I'm sure you can find it. And then I'm thinking that's it, right? Those kind of. There's another piece on the top, which is if you are a community that sells your space, so you use click-through behavior stuff, then I would put that as another thing. But you can almost
pay-per-click.
Yeah. Yep. You can almost do that entire math, and that's your whole bar chart. I'm getting way into the weeds, but in my head, I can almost see this, and I can call it like, what's my TEIP, right? That's my total economic impact of the post.
I think some people like weeds. I'm not a weeds person, but
right.
You lost me at weeds.
Yeah, and it's not legal in Texas, and blah blah blah.
Not yet. So just to kind of bring this, I guess, back to, I think that analytics or that those metrics are key, and I'm not exactly sure what to really just to say, hey, these are the things we should look at, right? And so I don't know if you have some thoughts around.
No, but so I think the last point on this, I mean, so just to kind of do a little kind of cycle round, right? And the reason I got off on that point was around metrics and why you should metric and find your right users. So just to kind of pull back together what we've talked about so far, the points that Blake was making sure you brought was around how do you communicate the program, finding the right mix of people in the super user program, know why you're building it. So this is the part I kind of jumped off with regards to metrics.
That's right.
And I think you have to make sure you apply some sort of economic model. I mean, absolutely. Sure.
When you have somebody like our old boss is Devashish, then you definitely have to do that.
Even in my view, like you have to have some economic reason for the things that we do.
Yep.
I'd say 3 and 4 is being very similar, but it's around the motivation of individual, right? What motivates them? What's the reason for being there? To find that out. The last one was how to find them, right? And I think you were talking about some of I was calling them social traps, but in a sense you were laying out traps.
Yeah.
Well-defined, crafted traps in a good way to help make sure to find those users will find themselves in it, right? Whether it's through social activity, some sort of gamification, if you will, the way you kind of defined it. The last piece that I think we should do a separate conversation on was around mapping out the super user journey.
Ooh,
yeah. And I find that interesting because it gets this whole idea about the journey of a user overall. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can kind of save that as our next conversation point. But to kind of end this one, did you have an aha when you were kind of walking through it? Or if you didn't have one specifically, did anyone else have it other than thanks for building out my super user program?
Well, that was a great aha, right? Is thanks, Blake, for helping me build out my super user program over time. Yeah. I really appreciate that, and I did. But it was just, to me, it wasn't necessarily about what he talked about. I mean, it's amazing to me, that there's so many things out there that, there's a super user. I think we talked about this before, but there's a lot of, seems like names out there, advocacy program, super user program. I'm not saying they're all the same, but MVP program, et cetera. And so, for him to actually define that and help me understand it in a better way. And I think he helped others to understand it, but he also helped, one woman said, this helps me to know that I'm on the right track, Blake. And so, for me, the big deal about having calls like this is to help each other. And so, I wouldn't say it's an aha, but it made me feel really good that, look, I put this together, but Blake presented and others really enjoyed it, because what we do is extremely difficult, I believe. I mean, when you think
I
about
agree.
all
I
the
talk about this all the time.
stuff that we have to do, when you think of content strategy, engagement strategy, acquisition strategy, I mean, and then we got to build a super user program, then advocacy program, and then all these acronyms or names and shit, start coming at you, and you're like, no, we don't really have that, or do we? And so for me, he helped me to get me started and help me to build out slowly but surely, maybe through some tactical things that I can do, in the interim. To really kind of start building that over time. I'm not gonna have a super user program for a while,
Right,
and that's fine. But what I can do is 2 to 3 things, 4 things every 6 months, and then just kind of build upon it, see what works and see what doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that in our next podcast. This because I want to spend a little bit more time on this journey piece.
Okay.
Right. So I think it adds to other stuff. But until then, thank you very much for listening to Peers Over Beers. This is Michael Sandoval.
Chris Detzel.
All right. Thanks. We'll catch you up next time.
All right.